series that Arakawa is writing.
Wait, what? There's a new series?
Yeah, there is. Demons of the Shadow Realm. I think they just announced the anime for it too. It's not all out, but I feel like I got to start that one. Anyway, hello everybody. For today, I am joined by my friend Gavin, who does not have a fun pun today, but that's okay. We'll let it go.
I literally just realized that. Oops. Well, see, the thing is, what I learned from the series is that I should just be me, you know? I should just be myself. Like, I could be someone else, but I'm just Gav today, and that is a lesson I have learned through FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST Brotherhood.
Through the greed and Ling union, you're like, I just got to be true to myself. Well, we're going to be chatting spoilers for the whole show officially, because we have now come to the end, and I'm so excited to see your thoughts. So I'm just going to let you kind of launch us into it. We've reached the end, and I have so many different scenes and aspects of the end that I want to talk about, but I want you to feel like, since this is your first time with it, that you get to just say whatever is on your mind.
Okay. Oh my gosh, like, it's so interesting how many storylines there were and how much needed to be wrapped up, to the point where there would be several episodes in a row where you won't see a certain character. Like, it got to the point where I didn't see Al for a couple of episodes. Yes. And you know what? I didn't hate it. And I feel like that is such a strength of this show, that by this point, like, to begin with, like in the early days, all I wanted was Ed and Al. All I wanted was their adventures. All I wanted was to see them together. And I still did. Don't get me wrong, I still did. But because the world just expanded so much by this point, I was absolutely fine with having other characters carry the weight of their show on their shoulders, and seeing how they developed and how their storylines were coming to an end and how they were wrapping up. Because, yeah, we were getting towards the end, and I feel like you could feel it. You could feel it through, like, the ramping up the story. Things were getting so intense. And, yeah, like, there's only been a few animes where I've watched to the end, and it seems like having something so epic and big happen is something that can only be pulled off very well every now and then, because there's just so much to cover. But I felt like FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST Brotherhood did such a great job at bringing things to a close and having it still feel epic and exciting and amazing. Like, for instance, like, one of the things where I was so surprised by was, like, God, essentially, like, that whole thing with God. Like, it just became such a thing where it went out of this universe.
Remember when you thought Lust was going to be the big bad?
Like, literally, like, I was talking about small fry back then, and it's so funny, like, how, yeah, so many things in the goal of this series changed as the series went on, and to the point where, you know, we started the series with Ed and Al, they're on the hunt for a Philosopher's Stone, to having them reject the Philosopher's Stone at the end, and, you know, having them come to the realization that so many of the things that they stood for at the beginning has just shifted completely by the end, in so many different ways. And, yeah, like, I couldn't even fathom what was happening for the most of it. I was, you know, writing my notes for every episode as we were going on. And then sometimes, like, in the previous, you know, episode batches, I would message you. I didn't message you this time because I literally binged, like, pretty much the final 16 episodes. Like, well, I did have to go to bed. I had to. I did have to go to bed at one point because I was getting really tired. But I was like, I don't want to go to bed, right? But I have to. If I want to pay attention and I want to fully take this in, I need rest. I need a break from this because it is a lot. But yeah, this was like the first time where I kind of just existed in it, and I took it all in without trying to process my feelings elsewhere. Like, I had everything happen to me as I was watching, and yeah, and I will say I only, like, really got so emotional twice, and I'll get those moments.
Let's talk about it. Because there's a scene that when I was going through my notes last night preparing for this, I almost started crying just thinking about this one scene. I'm curious if it's one of the same ones for you. So yeah, what were the couple scenes that were emotional for you?
Okay, so the first one was, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some moments beforehand where I was, like, gagged, like I was gagged, but I wasn't emotional per se. Like for instance, Hawkeye getting slashed, Mustang losing his sight. Like these were moments that gagged me, and I was like, oh gosh, like this is a lot. But the first moment that really got me, very very close to tears, was when Ed was talking to Truth, and he finally comes to the realization that he was going to give up his alchemy for Al. And that was kind of like the moment where he says, like, who even needs alchemy when I've got them? And then Truth says, go ahead, take him home. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we've been waiting for this moment since the very first episode. And then you see Ed and Al come together and he's like, let's go home together. Like that, I'm getting teared up now thinking about it.
I know.
Like, let's go home together. And that was just, oh, I've been waiting so long for that to happen. And I didn't even realize it. Like, because we had Al the entire time, in a sense, like in the suit of armor, sure, and all this and the other, but there was so much of him missing up to that point. And yeah, just to have that moment where they were two young boys, you know, when that first happened, and now, you know, they've gone through so much and they can finally rest, I guess, like in a way.
Yeah.
Like there's so much closure there. But the second time was when Winry sees them both for the first time since Al has come back. And seeing, like you said this in the last live show as well, you said, like, I didn't even realize like how much Ed had grown up. Like he looks so grown up. And like I didn't realize that myself until this batch of episodes, honestly, in seeing Winry, you know, see them for the first time. In that, like, there's just like so much silence as well in that moment. Like she doesn't know how to process it. I don't know how to process it. And then like there's a big hug and everything. I was just like, oh my god, like, oh, that was so much for me. But it was so amazing. It was everything I wanted. And I definitely teared up at those moments.
So I have to tell you, because one of yours was one of mine. So I need you to see, I said in my notes, when Winry hears Al saying the dog is tickling him. It's that moment right before when she's like, she hears them outside and then she hears Al's voice because the dog is on him. And he's like, you're tickling me. And then it processes to her that if he's being tickled, that means, and just that like pause. Oh my gosh. But in my notes, look at all the crying emojis. That moment, I was like, okay, keep it together. And even right now, I'm like, oh, don't start. Because, oh man, because you really, I almost feel like you obviously root for them as the story progresses. You feel for them. They get so close so many times, and you're like, gosh darn it. You question, are we gonna get a happy ending? Are these kids gonna get their bodies back, or is one of them gonna die? You know, like you have this question throughout the story. You're wondering, especially early on when you see how willing Ed is to sacrifice himself, or when you're hearing that Alphonse has only so much time left, you're kind of constantly wondering, are they gonna live through this? So for them to finally get their bodies back, exactly what you described is just that relief of like, oh, you don't almost realize how much you wanted them to finally be able to, in your words, rest. They finally can rest. They've just been been through so much. They've earned it. And it's just, I think a good way to describe the ending is not so much that it's sad. There are sad moments about this story throughout. There's sad moments about this whole last section, but it's more that it was emotional. You kind of go through so many emotions, and some of them are hard. They make you want to cry, even though you're not devastated. You're just relieved, and you're so filled with so many different things processing the ending, especially when you see the final wall with all the pictures and you see, did you see all the pictures of like Ed finally getting to have like a family, and you're just like, oh gosh. So
like they've deserved it. As you said, like they've earned this. They've spent the entire series like fighting for each other, but also getting embroiled in the bigger picture and what is like preventing them from getting to their end goal. There's just so much at play there, and they definitely earned it. And one thing I loved as well is that this was all because of Ed and Al together, like them getting back together, them like Ed, you know, saving his brother, Al saving Ed to begin with, you know, like sacrificing himself, because there's just so much sacrifice in this. Oh my gosh, like Al sacrificing himself with the transmutation to give Ed the chance to fight Father. I'm still calling him Father. I don't know if he has like a different name or anything, but I'm still calling him Father. The the guy who
The
gets
dwarf and the
involved.
flask. Yeah.
Yes, the dwarf and the flask. Yeah. So like they do all of these things, and they have so many opportunities where they could have accepted help from someone else, and they do get help throughout the series, don't get me wrong, but to actually come to this moment. So like there was a moment when Al was confronted with his body and he was like, I'm not ready, like I'm not strong enough, and I need to help, and you know, all that. So that was amazing that again, like this was his goal to begin with, but he's rejecting that because he still needs to help. But it was when Ed rejects the Philosopher's Stone to bring Al back. Hohenheim, so one of my predictions was I thought Hohenheim would sacrifice himself for the boys, and he, like, this was a moment that did like start to get me emotional as well. But like I thought he would do a sacrifice, and he offered that, but and he says like, because I'm his father, that's the only thing that matters. I just want you to be happy. Like he accepts responsibility for them, but at the end of the day, Ed is still like, this is my responsibility. And I feel like if Ed had have allowed Hohenheim to do that, then I feel like Ed would never have rested after that. I feel like Ed and Al would have tried to have done something to save their father, because this was their mess, essentially. Like this is something that they did together. Obviously, Hohenheim had a hand in that by abandoning his children. Like he acknowledged that. But at the same time, Ed and Al, I felt, had to do this themselves, and they did it, and they earned it. And like the respect that what Ed gives up, like the alchemy at the end, and it's just like, but he doesn't need that because he has what he needs, you know. It's just, it's so sweet and lovely. Just
so a number of things that you just tapped into that were all in my notes that I wanted to cover. So when you were making those predictions about Hohenheim, and I'm just like, okay, like they're really good predictions because it makes sense. And like you said, he acknowledges that he feels like the whole reason they were in this is because of the fact that he wasn't there for them. And the fact that he was willing, that gets me just anytime a parent is willing to do whatever for their children. Yeah. So that part is quite emotional. But the rejection of that because of the idea, like, no, we promised that we would make sure that nobody had to pay the price for the thing that we did. But the part that I get so, like, I really got to hold it in, even though I know I have to self-soothe and remind myself, I know it's going to be okay. But when Alphonse realizes Ed needs his arm, and he's like, I'm going to sacrifice myself and hope that he brings me back. And when Ed watches it happen, that clap, because you're like, oh my gosh, no, because you're so worried. And again, I know everything's going to work out. And it gets me every single time, because that look on Ed's face of like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Especially because we've seen time and time again that Ed does feel like this falls on him. Like, he's the older brother. It was all his fault. He should have been there. He should have done things differently. So then to see his little brother make the sacrifice for him, I think is such a powerful moment, because it's almost always the reverse between the two of them. Not that Alphonse wouldn't do anything for Ed, but it's always like Ed fulfilling that older brother role. And so for Alphonse to just take that chance, a lot of the story is the trust between these two brothers as well, to trust that he's going to let Edward do whatever he has to. So then for Edward, like you're saying, to then turn around and give up alchemy altogether. And I like that little nod in the end where he still misses it, you know, when he's like, and he tries, and he's like,
on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mentioned when it came to predictions that I had told you, when you have that scene where the whole town is kind of coming together to rebuild, and the prediction I'd had, because I kept trying to tap into what were my predictions the first time. And one of them was like, is everything going to get demolished and then everybody's going to have to kind of start over? And it brings people together, though, and they realize they have each other. So obviously that's not exactly what happens, because they do save the day. But in a sense, that's kind of what happens for Edward. I feel like that moment is kind of foreshadowing for the fact that he is going to find finally the ability to let go, because he doesn't have this crazy heavy burden on his shoulders anymore. He can let that go, and he can just accept friendship and love. And he doesn't really need alchemy anymore, because he always sought alchemy out for what it could bring back. And now he has so much fulfillment in his life. And I just think that the whole full circle moment for them is really, really well done. It's so good. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say as well, especially since Ed, he can't shake the alchemy thing, because when he's kind of proposing a kind of relationship with Winry, and like she's like, why do you have to make everything about alchemy? Like the whole equal exchange thing and stuff. It's so funny. It's trying to be so funny. It's like, what? Give half of my life to you if you give half of yours to me, kind of thing. And I just love how when we just like gets rid of that whole kind of concept in general and just like it's nonsense and how about I just give you my whole life as like a slip up, and it's just like it's like the cutest, most awkward thing. Like they haven't changed. They're still so awkward, but there's just so
and then her realizing like, wait a second, that's probably too much. Maybe it should be more like 80 or 70. And then he just, when he puts his hand on her head and he's officially taller than her.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Really,
yes,
he did everything. He really did get everything. That was the number one thing. As long as Edward could grow.
Yeah, and you know what? He finally acknowledged the fact that he was short at one point during this batch of episodes as well. He acknowledged it. He, accepted it. And I feel like there was so much acceptance there on his own part that showed you how much he's grown as a character. And it was only then when he could do it symbolically that he could actually grow physically. Also because, he saved Al, and there's that whole thing where, was he like really like embodying both him and his brother? So that's kind of why he isn't like grown. So like there's so many factors to it, but I do think symbolically, once he's accepted his own position and his own kind of person, that's when he could actually grow and become the Ed we come to love by the end of it. He doesn't have to be the full metal alchemist because his heart was made full metal anyway. You know what I mean? There's just so many beautiful touching moments like that.
It's so nice. I mean, obviously not everybody made it to the end. So I've been mentioning a number of times that I feel like Hoenheim is one of the most tragic characters, not just in the story, but in most stories. This idea of he was a slave, then he was plagued with the guilt of everything that happened that he unknowingly played a role in. So then everybody from this place that he grew up in is gone, and he hears their voices. So then he's on this quest and this journey to try to set things right. And then when you find out why he left Ed and Al, what he's been preparing for, but the guilt that brings him, that he had to leave his wife and children behind, he had to try to reconcile with all these voices in his mind so that he could rally them all together to fight back. And then in the end, when he goes to Trisha's grave and he's like, Ed finally called me dad. He's like, he also basically cursed at me too. He's like, but hey, it's a step, right? And how he's ready to finally be with Trisha again. But then he thinks about it and he's like, but he essentially is thinking like, but I don't want to die, because he's realizing after everything, he still kind of wants to see his sons grow and he wants to live in this world where he finally accomplished. And then he kind of doesn't get to, but it's both peaceful and really, really tragic when Pinocchio comes out. Pinocchio? Why can I never remember how they say her name? Granny. When Granny comes out and finds his body, and it's just kind of like, oh, you old fool. You never... Yeah, that part...
But he died with a smile, though. He died with a smile. And yeah, it's the fact that he did have something to live for now, and it's kind of... But you know what? It's nice to know that he can also finally be at peace at the same time too. Like, it was just such a touching moment. How many souls was it? That was, I think he said like 536,000 or something. He mentioned at one point, and he was like, I talked to every single one of them. And like when you realize what he's been doing for that long, like I know I've mentioned this before, like how much shame I felt for my initial reactions to Hohenheim. But like, yeah, it's like it's one of the biggest character shifts I think I've ever had with a character, like ever, and I think that was just so masterful in the way that happened, because it all makes sense now. It isn't just the fact of a dad leaving his sons just because he was an absentee father or anything like that, but yeah, because he didn't have a choice. And if he hadn't have done that, would we have had the outcome that we've had now? Would we have been able to have defeated father? Would we have been able to have given Ed and Al the future that they can now have? So a lot of that does come down to like Hohenheim's sacrifice and how he used his time that he ended up getting with the sacrifices of all the people's souls, of all the people he knew being inside him. Like he used that. And I think a beautiful kind of message and theme of FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST is there is so much tragedy, there is so much like death and so much that people have done that's awful. Can we do something with that can honor them, and can we use that for good? Which I think is beautifully demonstrated in Mustang, and like how his story is starting to develop, and like the future of him as well, and how he can use the Philosopher's Stone to repair his sight, but also make change, especially for the Ishvalan, and making amends and stuff that really needs to happen in order for things to be fixed, in order for you to move on. So I think, there's just so much about humanity from that we see even in the non-human characters. There is still so much humanity there, and I think that's what this series comes down to, is like the basic humanity, and how that can actually be a strength, not a weakness, because the amount of times the villains have underestimated humanity, and that's probably one of the reasons why they failed in the end. They underestimated humans, the power of humans, the kindness, the emotions, and they ended up wanting what humans had by the end. Didn't the father say at one point he wanted a family or something? And even
I was gonna say yes, and I think that ties partly to the tragedy of Hoenheim, is Hoenheim saying, when they're talking back when he was a slave and then kind of had started to build himself into something different, and he's got this bond when it was still the dwarf and the flask, and he says pretty much all he wants is just community and family. That's all anybody really wants. And the fact that Hohenheim lived most of his life never having that, then he finally got it. He finally had this wife and these two boys, and he couldn't really actually spend the time with them because he loved them so much that in order to save them, he had to leave them. And then in the end, when he finally maybe has a chance, it's like, well, he's split in two because he wants to be at peace with his wife, but then his sons, he wants to know them a little better. And so you're like, the tragedy of that he got it, but not for very long, that he never really got to enjoy that time with them, but he got to know each of them a little bit on the journey. And he finally could kind of come to his wife feeling like he did it, because that was his whole thing. That was the whole reason he left. And it was very much rooted in, like you're saying. But I wanted to talk about why, because your whole point about humanity, I think, is why this story stands out so well as having these epic stakes that occur, but also you feel for every individual character, because each of the individual, sorry, really quick, is there somebody's dog barking? A neighbor?
Oh my god, maybe. I'm gonna close that window. I can't hear it because I guess you don't, but because you're hearing me, maybe you could hear it better than I do. Maybe I think that I've closed the window.
Poor Pop, it sounded really anxious. Anyway, so I think with Ed and Alphonse as an example, obviously you see very much from the beginning their motivations, their personal goals, and what they're looking to achieve. And then they consistently set that aside for the sake of humanity. And then you'll see other characters time and time again doing that as well. But you get to know each of them and their personal struggles, and then how often they set those struggles aside. So with Scar, you see him set aside his quest for vengeance, which is arguably the most understandable of any of the characters' motivations when you see all what was occurring with him. But he sets that aside, and he sets aside also the very justifiable personal reasons why he should, if anything, oppose them and want them to fall. But he sets that aside for the sake of humanity. You see so many characters doing this. And when they have to set aside their own personal struggles for the sake of humanity, it makes you feel like, oh, they were so close. Like you feel that sacrifice that they're making. But the way that they all, how powerful it can be when collectively people all make that decision to come together for the good of mankind, it really moves you, because it's one thing when you have characters do that for the service of the plot, but you don't actually feel like they're giving anything up. And then the reverse can happen where you don't really feel the impact because maybe it's a lone chosen one type and they are defying all the odds. They're the hero. And then everybody else is like, wow, you're the hero we needed. But there's something a little bit different about when you see all of these characters and you feel for them, and they all are setting aside their personal reasons for wanting what they want for the sake of everyone. And that to me is why this story is both incredibly moving from a place of each individual character, but also on the grand scheme of some of the bigger thematic pieces That's why it's one of
And
my favorites. It's brilliant.
And to highlight like the evolution that Scar went on, one like he was so driven by anger and yeah, as you said, like vengeance. And then there was a moment in episode 54 when they stopped Mustang from obliterating envy, and Scar says, "I try to think of a world where a man in charge could be ruled by hate." And I'm just like, this is so massive coming from someone who we were introduced to as someone filled with hatred for the people who obviously exterminated the Ishvalan and taking that on these state alchemists and all like the cycle of hate that's kind of just come from that, and how much of a battle it's been for Scott to get to where he then says, I dread to think of a world that's ruled by a man who is driven by hate. You know, I feel like stuff like that is just so incredible. And I think having the human emotion and seeing how that is like taken each of the characters, even the homunculi has also been very interesting to watch unfold too. But yeah, I agree with like literally everything.
I mean, we obviously we're here. We need to talk about this scene. I have Mustang in the background angry because it's the best. Beyond the Inferno is one of the most iconic episodes for many reasons. And I have a quote that's tying into what you were saying too. Mustang specifically, when Edward and Hawkeye and Scar are all basically telling him, you need to stop. And his quote that I can't have that, I can't afford to lose you. This is what he's saying to Hawkeye. What kind of situation is this? Scolded by a child, lectured by a man who once came after me as an enemy, causing you pain once again. I'm just a big fool. I'm sorry. And I know you said you listened to the dub, correct, for this? Okay, you need to go listen to this scene with the sub, because right before this moment, that scene where he like screams and he lets the fire out into the hallway, the voice actor, like the pain that he delivers in this scene for this whole episode, to be honest, is so good that Sean and I just kept rewinding it and just being like, oh, every single moment, because we're like, it's so good. So that scene is you feel his pain. And I think that part of what makes this scene so great is that, one, you love Hughes, you know, he's such a sweetheart. You see throughout the course of the series those flickers whenever Mustang, that anger comes out of, do you know who killed Maze Hughes? You know, whenever he asks that question, you see it. So you're having this develop and fester. So when it finally comes to the forefront, you feel it too. Like you want him to kill Envy. You're like, yeah, get him. You know, like you feel it. And I think that, you know, the phrase online that people will use, like maturing is realizing, I think I've brought this up before. I feel like, you know, maturing is realizing that Hawkeye and Edward and Scar are right, because when you want to just get that surface level satisfaction of like, take him out, make him suffer, you know, with Envy. But then when you press pause and you really think about it and you see what he's becoming, and you recognize that this was the greatest fear that Hawkeye had when she chose to follow him and when she chose to allow him the secrets to flame alchemy, that he would use this power in a way that just establishes his power over others, and that it wouldn't be for the sake of protection. It wouldn't be for the sake of the betterment of society. It would be for his own gain in some fashion. And in this instance, obviously, it's him just purely just trying to make Envy suffer. It wasn't even, we need to remove Envy from the equation. He clearly establishes he can do that immediately. And it's not that. It's just going to torture. And when you see him getting so consumed by that, to the point where he even tells Edward, he says something like, I'll take your hand off, or something, you know, he says something really extreme, is he's willing to hurt the people he loves the most. Maybe not Scar, Hawkeye more than anything, but he's willing to hurt other people, innocent people in this instance, because that's how badly he's letting the hate consume him. And for him to give that up, it's its own form of sacrifice for him to finally let that go. Because also, you know that Hughes wouldn't have wanted that. That's not how Hughes would have wanted his life to be avenged, if you even want to think of it like that, because I don't think Hughes was that kind of character. But, and then also the flashback you get right before this with Hawkeye, which, by the way, one of my favorite pieces of music in the whole show, because it's like a variation on the sad theme, we'll say. But when she's sitting at the grave and talking to Mustang, and she's like, it was just a boy, you know, and she's just talking about what they've done and how she hates this, and that she doesn't want to keep going like this, and that she says something to the extent of the war never left her. Yeah, she says the Ishvalan war is still not over within me. No, it will never be over for as long as I live. And then right around that same moment, when you have Hawkeye saying thank you to Scar for helping, and he tells her that her gratitude isn't needed. Just all around these characters finally being able to let go of some of that. It's
It
great.
is.
And it's
It's how they
not
deal with it, isn't it? It's like how they deal with it. Like Hawkeye could definitely go the wrong way with the Ishvalan war, like and how she processes that. She could go the wrong way about it, and any which way. Whereas with Mustang, him wanting to torture Envy for what Envy did to Hughes, like it's like an eye for an eye, but like this is the difference between a hero and a villain. It's like what Mustang was about to do to Envy. If Mustang was just like left to his own devices, that's something a villain would do. And I feel like having them hold him back in a way was like it just made me be reminded of what he was fighting for, I think. And I'm so glad that they went the direction they did, because I even wrote my notes, why in the world are they stopping him from killing Envy? Like, why in the world? Like, Envy is evil and they will kill him at any chance, blah blah blah. But like, the amount of pity I felt for Envy by the end,
so
I was like,
pathetic.
so yeah. And I was like, wow, like Envy is getting his ass handed to him, like he's getting beat so much. And I was like, this is not the Envy who I kind of had in my mind at the start of the show. Envy was a lot more formidable, and I didn't think you could ever stop Envy. And now to see them so shriveled up and almost in a pitiful way, the fact that I was not expecting Envy to destroy their own philosopher's stone, I was not expecting that whatsoever, being defeated and like crying, and oh my gosh, and they were jealous, which obviously makes sense of what humans had. And it was it was really hard to watch, actually, like really really hard to watch. So if Mustang had have killed Envy in a way that was like more a tyrannical way, it wouldn't have been satisfying. That would not have been a satisfying ending for Envy. So I love how we tackled that.
What's interesting too, just how much you feel the rest of them. Just being like, how pitiful is this creature when it won't stop? You see Mustang just Mustang kind of just crumples to the ground, like, what have I done? And you have Hawkeye and him kind of comforting each other, and then Ed and Scar just sort of watching. And I do want to take note before I keep going with this thought. I appreciated that Mustang was told by Hawkeye, we're not going to let Envy live. Envy will be taken out, but it can't be like this. And I think that distinction is helpful, because then you're left with like this sort of Disney cliche, like, but we're the good guys. What if we like extend a hand? And you're like, that we're kind of beyond that, but this is not the way to do it. Anyway, getting back to though, they're all just listening to this rant, these cries, these pathetic cries from Envy, and Envy's trying to rile him up, like, remember you hate him though, and you hate him, and they did this. Don't you remember they did this? And the way they just all kind of sit and listen, like, I can't believe this is what turned us all against each other. Because in a way, Envy was responsible for what happened with the Ishvalan War. Envy did kind of rile them up against each other. And when they realize that that's how pathetic that little creature, who all it wanted was, in a sense, to be like them, it just didn't know how to do it. And so for them to realize, like, I can't believe that this is what had us all so angry at each other, if we could have all just thought logically for a second. And then thank goodness you did. Yeah, Hawkeye, the real hero of the show. The way that she always, stood steadfast. Which, can we just talk about how cool when he does lose his sight and she's telling him where to go with that part's awesome.
I literally wrote in my notes, like, they were made for each other. The way that she can direct him, and like, he's lost his eyesight, but she is acting as, that other sense for him. And it really does help to solidify just how much they've meant to one another this entire time. The fact that she can like work with him so well under the circumstances, and he can listen to her, and it's that kind of again, like the trust that Mustang has in Hawkeye, the trust that like she's leading him, he can't see, and his life is in her hands. And I felt that was like such a really touching, beautiful moment. Still shocked me to no end though when they were
Right.
pulled in. Yeah, it's like, and I think it was Ed who was like, "Oh, this is like a really bad situation," or like he doesn't have any wounds or something, and then Mustang says something like, "How can you see my wounds when it's so dark in here?" or something like that, and that was like, "Whoa, is
You're
this
like,
this?"
what? No, come
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
I was like, it's not dark though. It's not dark right now. Wait, what? Oh my gosh, my heart
And
was in
it's so
my mouth.
unfair because he chose
So
not to. And we'll talk about the villains in a second. Wrath is such a nuisance, but such a cool nuisance at the same time in
yeah,
this whole last batch of episodes. But
yeah,
that where they pin him down and you're like, he made the decision not to, even when she was dying in front of him. Once again, sacrifice.
oh,
But also I just want to take note of the fact that in the landscape of fantasy currently, where fantasy romance is like very explicit and very much centering the constant longing and attraction and things like that, we're fed solely off of the like one hug from Mustang and Hawkeye when she's healed and he comes over and like squeezes her. And May is talking to him in that moment. I texted my friend. I was like, he did not hear a word she just said. He's just so relieved that that Hawkeye is alive.
less is
But
more.
anyway,
Less is way more,
yeah,
and it's so touching. And
yes.
honestly, yeah, like when Hawkeye, when she got slashed, and so I couldn't. I was glued. I was shocked. I couldn't write notes down. I couldn't do anything else. I was like, this is not how she goes. And I love the fact that yeah, Mustang. I thought maybe he would do the transmutation because of that, but as soon as, and I feel like he probably would have, but as soon as Hawkeye looked at him, and she was like, "You're not going to do this." Like it was that kind of moment when it kind of clicked for him. But the fact that Mustang did have to be confronted by it is truth, right? The weird white thing that's like truth. Although there is like the point of, well, yeah, what am I? Like, who am I? I am you. I am God. You know, all this, that, and the other. I love the fact that Truth didn't say anything when Mustang was like confronted, and because he shouldn't have been there, like he didn't perform it willingly or anything. Like there's nothing that he did to justify him having something taken from him. But I just love how that representation of like nothing being said, like there are no words, like this is truth and there are no words. And yeah, like I just found that so fascinating. I'm still wrapping my head around it all. I still find some of the concepts of this show to be maybe a little bit out of my reach still, and it definitely comes to the whole like truth sections and stuff, but I find them so deeply
I'm
fascinating.
curious your
Mm.
interpretation then on the dwarf and the flask when it's confronted by truth.
Mm.
And truth is essentially saying it's so obvious. And you're kind of like waiting, and then it just sends it back. And you're like, what were you going to say? It doesn't tell you. So you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that it's up for interpretation what it was that led the dwarf and the flask. Because before the dwarf and the flask, all they wanted was to be out of it and like see the world. And
Mm.
then I think in a way, the thing that ate up and made the dwarf and the flask too hungry for more was just that they were never content or satisfied ever. And I think that part of what makes this entire show easier to watch, but still hits on some of the most devastating themes is the way that it turns the villains into essentially monsters or like pieces of the worst of us personified to some degree, but then the concepts surrounding them are still true of human beings as well. So in the case of the dwarf and the flask, one of my interpretations is that they never were happy with just what, Hohenheim talked about, like, well, we want connection. And for them, it's like they always had to go the next step. So they made their family, but then that wasn't enough. Then they thought, well, humans are a weakness. I got to extract the things from me that make me weak. And then so it pulls its own humanity out of itself, essentially. And it's like, I have to have more. And then I have to challenge God. I have to have. And it's just this constant need to have the next thing. And in a
Mm.
sense, I'm like, yeah, does that not represent the worst of us? Is the
Mm.
constant desire to, at the expense of all life, it doesn't matter how horrifying, it doesn't matter who does it or who suffers, as long as you gain something. And it's just this constant pursuit of having the next thing. So even though it's just this weird looking figure and it feels like you're talking about like very out of sorts and you're like, this is getting out there, at the same time, there is something very real about it, about how sometimes it feels like the absolute worst of us, the people that cause the most harm, are the ones that, in a sense, are kind of like the real life versions of that. If they could, they would do the same thing, kind of feeling, as bizarre as those things are.
Yeah.
So what was your interpretation though with the truth confronting the dwarf and the flask?
I really enjoyed the fact that it kind of, I mean, I think I wasn't feeling any sympathy. I did feel some sympathy for Envy and all this and the other, to see them be reduced to like their, their very true form of who they really are, and to see the dwarf and the flask, to see them stripped down to basically nothing anymore, like back to the beginning. And I think was the truth said, you never grew beyond your days in the flask, kind of thing. And all they wanted was, that knowledge and, wanting more. And it is that we will never be satisfied. Like, as humans, we will never have enough answers. We will never know the truth to absolutely everything. And I feel like, because I think there was a moment when the dwarf and flask asked something and truth didn't respond. Like, they just stopped responding. And when that moment happened, it was like, there is only so much that you can learn and only so much that you can find out. And this was the end for the dwarf and the flask to find things out. Like, they went a little bit too above their means. I think there was a moment earlier on when Father said, people who play God or try to do God, they have to suffer the consequences, kind of thing. And that was when I remember Celine being there. I can't remember the exact quote, but I remember Celine being there. And they've shed the Father shell, the Hoenheim thing, and they said something about flying too close to the sun, essentially, in having to pay the consequences of that. And I feel like that definitely came tenfold to the dwarf and the flask by the time it had to be confronted by truth. And it was a thing that I can't quite explain or know exactly, but it's something that is a really giant concept for this series to have something like this be presented, because even the dwarf and the flask asks, what are you, as well, like, again, like, still asking questions even towards its end, because it'll still not know everything and it will never know everything. And the response it gets is from truth a little less assuredly than when truth speaks to Ed about, I am this, I am that. And when it's speaking to the dwarf and the flask, it's saying, perhaps I'm this, perhaps I'm that. And it's kind of like a keeping of all of the information.
Withholding.
Yeah, there's like a purposefully, like, keeping that from this thing that has tried to learn too much or try to do too much and still not be satisfied by what it gets. So I feel like even if truth gave all the answers, everything that they possibly could, it still would never be enough. It's like
it's like a magnified version of, in a weird parallel here, between Mustang and it, because flame alchemy, only Mustang has been entrusted with this power, and there's the conversation of, if this goes too far, I'm taking you out. And there was nothing to hold back the dwarf and the flask. So in a way, not saying that Mustang would have been doing all this, of course, but just a similar concept of what you do with the knowledge that you do gain and the power that you gain from said knowledge. What do you do with that? And part of what makes it feel satisfying is that at the end of the day, and that feeling of the good guys won, is that Mustang did set aside certain feelings for the sake of something better. And then the dwarf and the flask was never, they were never satisfied with what they got. They always had to have the next thing. And it was always for their own personal gain, as opposed to, kind of tying back the theme that we were talking about before, as opposed to doing what's best for the sake of humanity. It was the ultimate form of selfishness. This is what happens when the curiosity that Ed and Al have, which you see time and time again, and I don't think most of us have a problem with curiosity or seeking answers, but for them, it had its consequences, but they were always trying to right wrongs, and they never had malicious intent in the first place. So you're seeing that journey for them, and the things I talked about with Mustang. And there's a lot of other characters, like the various different characters that did experiments and things like that. Like, oh, now they have the guilt and they're really settling into that guilt to understand what they've done. And then when they have a chance to make things right, they attempt to make things right. But then this creature, this, detestable creature, it wants to seek out power and knowledge, and it wants to feel everything we're feeling, but it only ever wants to do it for itself. So it's the combination of extreme greed and extreme selfishness combined. And it's interesting because it thinks that in removing all those little pieces of itself that it got rid of the weaknesses. But there's almost this sense of balance. Like, envy can make you appreciate the way that other people are, and you can see other people be like, I want that for myself, but then you can work on yourself to become better in a sense. It's kind of like healthy competition, if you will, or it can become an ugly thing. But then the sloth aspect of like, why bother, that feeling is like, sometimes you need that to kind of counteract the obsession with trying to better somebody. So it's like the things that we see as weaknesses are, in a sense, like all kind of balancing things out. And when you take all of that out of the equation, all you're left with is literally nothing. So you're going to seek everything, and then you're going to fall. And I really liked that way that it was portrayed in this, as weird as it is, because it's weird. I think it's very odd, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely seeing how he got rid of like so much of like what made him human. I think Truth also said that at one point, like, you shared the human side of you that you had at the beginning, kind of thing. And by doing that, and I do find it so poetic how much the like greed, wrath, lust, all of that, they're kind of representations of the different sides of humanity. And by shedding that, it kind of didn't help in the long run, but also the poeticness of how each of them ended is something that I feel like is something that is just constantly in motion, because again, it's that whole equal exchange kind of thing, like things happen to balance. And Ed and Al, what they did, they gave up so much. Like, Ed lost an arm and a leg, and that was for his brother, and there isn't anything he would do to get his brother back. And then Al lost his body, so he couldn't really feel, even though all he wanted was the feel of his mother's touch and stuff. So they gave up things, and I don't think the Dwarf and the Flask ever gave up anything that was of consequence. So it's kind of, like it's been a beautiful journey of seeing how a lot of things have come full circle, whether that's the demise of all of the homunculi and the parts of the Dwarf and the Flask that got rid of, up to like Ed and Al finally getting what they deserved by the end, and what they had to sacrifice along the way. And yeah, as you said before, sacrifice is a huge thing.
I think too, it also plays into the alchemy and alchemy, and also the knowledge that the Ishvalans provided through Scar's brother, where all of that combined, it's like, okay, one gives you the ability to do, and then the other kind of is able to reverse it. So it's like there has to be something to hold back, and again, that feeling of balancing as well. And how they even keep talking about like there's this wrongness in the alchemy here, because you don't have the other aspects of it kind of all pieced together. So it's almost like even the magic is a reflection of the themes, and even the symbols behind the magic feel like everything in its place. And then also there's the reverse of that. And so I like the way all of that plays in together. We've been talking about like concepts and emotional moments. I feel like we got to talk about some of the cool stuff and the funny stuff. And the funniest part is Sig and Armstrong like just being muscular together and taking out Sloth. It's the best.
Yeah, the amount of admiration between them is just so funny. And it's kind of like everyone else just has like watch it happen. So like, it's so cool because we have Izumi. She comes back, she's like, I am an alchemist, and you see her husband and then Armstrong, and it's just like this moment where I just couldn't help but admire the fact that these two guys, they're just being guys, like they're admiring so much about each other, but there is just so much like respect there. It is so funny. And one thing I have loved more about this section as well is that we did get a little bit more of Armstrong, and seeing like Olivier and how they kind of have this really weird brother and sister dynamic as well. Like, they provided me so many laughs as well, like how they kind of operated together, but still seeing like how deeply they still cared for one another and loved one another. It's just so amazing.
I like how Sig and Armstrong are admiring each other's muscles and everything. But then also Olivier, I feel like for sure also has a girl crush on Izumi because she's kind of like, who's this lady? You know, the two of them are, the Armstrong siblings are like, wow, there are people even more awesome than us.
It was a great kind of combo to have because I didn't predict Izumi and her husband and then Olivier and Armstrong to kind of cross paths. So that was actually like a really cool moment. And to see the amount of respect, like, I feel like it takes so much to get respect from Olivier. Like, she is very hard to please, but she gets like instant respect to Izumi. And it's like, wow, like, yeah, I think she does have a bit of crush.
When Izumi gets taken and Sig is all beside himself, like, we have to find her. And I'm just like, poor Sig. But also Olivier, another cool moment to do with her. When the soldiers are like, I don't know what to do because I take my commands from, you know, King Bradley, but they're like, I take my commands from King Bradley, but also we're in trouble right now. And she just like takes the gun and puts it in her face and is like, well, then shoot me or make a decision. Like, you know, that whole moment, you're like, that's why she's a leader of the North. You know, that's why she's the Briggs commander, because she's awesome. And
yeah, she has so much. She doesn't. She has so much like faith in the people who she leads. Like, you can see it in her. And again, like, she is one of my favorites, absolutely, just because of how much I love her so much. Yeah, like her confrontation, like, she understands the power of truth, I think, and how she is able to tell the military men about, like, this is what people are doing. Like, I need you to use your own judgment because, like, you can either be sheep or you can actually make change and like do the right thing. And I definitely love that standoff. And it really does lend into the whole political side of it as well, especially because I think it's Izumi. There was a guy who, I can't remember a lot of the officials' names. I don't care to remember them because they are
I know who you're talking about.
Terrible. Yeah. Well, the one who says they wanted to create a world without war, and Izumi says you just had to murder the world first. It's kind of like they didn't really want peace. They don't want peace. They just want compliance. They want followers. They want to have everyone kind of like bend the knee to them essentially and follow them without question.
Perfectly capable getting rid of most of the rest of humanity so long as they can still profit. And once again, kind of hard to not see the parallels between that and also just I feel like we need an Olivier right now to go up to people who are just mindlessly obeying orders and be like, look at what you're doing and tell me that this seems right to you. I just feel like we need more of that, you know. And again, she has her faults, but she also, when she sees like absolute villainy right in front of her, she knows when to make the right decision, and it's great.
It is, and I love the parallel as well because you do have what the military are doing with Father, but also the followers, and like a lot of these government officials, or not exactly the officials, but the soldiers are just doing their jobs and they're just kind of following orders. Like, are they really like the bad guys? It's the exact same with the homunculi, really, and like, you know, like greed, in all this and the other. Like, they were, well, not so much greed because greed, we love greed, but like, say sloth, for instance, they're following orders too. You know, like, they're kind of doing something that if they were thinking on their own, I mean, maybe they still have, the thing is, they were created in a way that meant that they couldn't really, they were just kind of following orders. So there's that whole parallel as well, which I did really love. But yeah, how it kind of, it has this whole real world thing to it where there is so much going on with the people who are in power and how they abuse that power and trying to get someone in power who will do the right thing and have the hearts of the people, which is why I think having Mustang as somebody who at first rejected that Philosopher's Stone, but then they were like, oh, but you know, like, this will help, you know, change the lives of the people you want to change, and they want to be able to do this in a way of honoring them, and the only way they can make things right. That's why it's so important to have someone in power who won't abuse that power. So yeah, that, again, another reason why I love Olivier so much. She is willing to tackle head on and throw like a mirror to people and be like, this is what's happening. Like, this is actually the truth. You know, like, I I love that. I just respect it so much.
And I think it speaks to why Buccaneer does what he does for Fu, which was so sad. That scene, and like the whole fight between them and Bradley, when you're like, oh my gosh, he's gonna get him, and then when he doesn't, you're like, no. So Buccaneer kind of getting that extra shot. It's visually awful because of the way he stabs him through to get to Bradley.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it sort of, for somebody like Fu who held so much to honor and trying to have this, if you're gonna have a sacrifice like what happened to his granddaughter's arm or something like that, it's like it's got to mean something. So when he sacrifices himself and it almost seems like it's not going to mean anything, and then Buccaneer kind of gives honor to that by sacrificing himself as well, it speaks to what I think Olivier instilled in her own soldiers, but then also just these two people from these two different places who don't even know each other coming together because they see a threat that needs to be taken out.
Yeah, and this is when I started hating myself, because the whole fight with King Bradley was pretty epic, and seeing Wrath doing all that, I was actually a little bit attracted to him, I'm not gonna lie. Like, the way
I was waiting for you to admit this.
I was like, he's never been hotter, which is so bad. But like, say when Fu had the explosives and King Bradley just like slices the explosives, I was like, damn, that is he my new man?
Can I just say, have we
Yeah.
talked about this? He looks like Tom Selleck, right? Does he look
Oh,
like Tom Selleck? He looks so
yes,
much like him.
actually, yes.
It's like if Tom Selleck became an anime character, that's what he would look like. But anyway, yeah. So I've been, first off, waiting because I was like, I feel like Gavin thinks this. It's safe, you can tell me. But yeah, Wrath is also, here's my guilty thought. He's so cool. He's so cool as a villain. And also the amount that you think like, oh, we got him. And you're like, gosh, darn it. Like, you know, when the train explodes, you're like, he definitely lived through that. And then when he shows back up, it seems like, okay, they finally got everything handled. Yay. And then he comes on and he's like, your ruler's back. And you're like, no, he's going to mess everything up. And he just casually walks up. There's also, there's multiple cool scenes with I'm going to call it like the hallway, where it goes up. There's like the scene with the tank that happens with Greed. And then later when Wrath is going up, and then just, there's a lot of really awesome action scenes in that moment. That whole fight between him and, I feel like I kind of was trying not to give it away, but last batch of episodes when you see Greed and him face off very, very temporarily, when Greed shows up at his house and he's like, I need answers. What are these memories that are plaguing me? They fight a little bit and you're like, that's a fight I would see more of. And then you get more of it, which is cool. But then when he shows up and, like we discussed, pins Roy Mustang down, and you're like, no, gosh, we can't get, that's a good villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And can I just say, his wife, so sad. Everything happening with his wife, where she's just like, is my Bradley okay? Where's my son? And you're like, this poor old woman, she doesn't deserve this. And then his response as he's dying is just basically like, that's the life she chose. That's the life of a wife of a Fuhrer and stuff. And especially who he's saying it to, because he's saying it to someone, I don't know if you remember this scene, but it's like as he's dying and you see Lan Fan is the one that's kind of over him, looking at him. And he's just kind of like, oh, well, this is the life of a person who's dedicated to a ruler, which I thought was a really interesting interaction because of the fact of who she is to Ling, because she's kind of always giving her life over. But I feel like she kind of looks and thinks like, that's not what it's going to be like. No. And what you could have had between her and yourself, if only you had actually cared. And I think Ling is an example. We've been talking a lot about Mustang and how he seems like a person that makes sense to have as a ruler. But Ling also, because the both of them, they never want to leave anybody behind. They honor the people who lost their lives and the sacrifices they made. So I like the two of them as characters that we see as potential rulers in the future,
because they care, they genuinely care. Because it was I'm pretty sure it was Ling at one point said, like, what was the point of this power if I can't even, like, after Fu died, it was like, what was the point of this power if I can't even save this person kind of thing. It's like every single life matters to them, and that is what separates them from like King Bradley, for instance. But yeah, I loved it when King Bradley came back. I mean, at first I was like, not this bozo, not again. But like he was like, why would I go like through the back door of my own castle, kind of thing. It's just like so. I got chills that moment. I was like, you know what, he's got a point. He does have a point.
He has some pretty iconic moments.
Yeah, he actually does. Like he holds his own very well. His fight with Scar was really good, and just like his fight with like pretty much everyone. Like, he was just giving it his all. And yeah, every single time he thought that maybe he would be defeated, he would just come back swinging. And I found it very interesting that by the end, though, because he is very wrathful and stuff, but he seemed quite accepting by the end and a little bit peaceful as well, almost like the same as like Hohenheim. Like he's kind of grayed over, and Wrath died peacefully, which is like such an odd thing in my eyes.
And yeah, he's the part of why he's one of the more fascinating of the homunculi is the fact that he was a person first, and there is always that question of, is there actually still a person in there? And I kind of feel like,
sorry, what got me was that there was 11 attempts at it. Like King Bradley, like 11 attempts or something. The doctor was talking about all that. I was like, what?
Oh yeah, earlier when they showed Bradley young in a previous episode and going through it, you see the pile of bodies of the ones that their bodies couldn't handle the injections. And then those are the ones that they make the weird soldiers of that end up fighting Mustang.
The mannequins?
No, not the mannequin ones. The ones that are all like almost like versions of King Bradley. And then they're like, you got to be kidding me! What the heck? Those are all the ones that didn't. Yeah, so you get that in Bradley's flashback way earlier. And once again, she's always bringing everything back together. The amount of things that she brings back is pretty crazy. You said something that I wanted to bounce off of, where Ling is saying, what's the point of having all this power? I couldn't even save this one person. And that is so similar to Edward thinking about Nina. And the fact that doesn't he even say when he gives up his alchemy, like, I couldn't even save one little girl. And the full circle moment of that. And I talked about it pretty much right after that, I think in our first discussion, is that from episode to episode, you do see the characters reflect on the things that have happened that have gotten them to this point. And that's part of what I think makes them feel so human, is that we're all made up of every experience that we've had. So the fact that you still see him in the end being like, I couldn't even save this one girl. And it's like, oh, that still eats at him, And I think it really goes well with your point about if Hohenheim had sacrificed himself, and if that had been the means of Ed and Al being together as themselves again. I think you're right. I think that would have been another thing that weighed on them. And instead, he got to die kind of peacefully at his wife's grave instead.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I love the fact that we have harkened back to something that it is a huge thing, because again, one of the things I'll probably always remember from the series is episode 4 with Nina. And, but it's something that it sounds like the grand scheme of everything that's happened in this series, it should really just be one little thing that happened. Like, it shouldn't have made like this much of an impact, but it does. And I think again, like, that lends to the idea of like loss of innocence, like a child like losing their life and things like that. It's like these are things that I feel like to be human is to feel those emotions, and to still have Ed all this months later. I can't remember like how long much time has passed, but like all this time later still reflect on that and be like, yeah, alchemy is great, but I couldn't save this one girl. And that's something that I feel is just such a haunting but a beautiful like lesson to learn, is that we can't save everyone, and we'll never be able to save everyone, and we can only do what we can. And yeah, like to have that fundamental human emotion is something that separates the heroes from the villains. And I love saying that.
It's kind of a interesting concept that Show Tucker was sort of like if the dwarf and the flask had restrictions, because obviously Father, I'll call him, Father, he's willing obviously to sacrifice his children for the sake of his own means, whatever can benefit him, whatever thirst for knowledge he has. he doesn't really care. And Show Tucker was like that too. It's like, oh, this is what it looks like when a person is completely without care, empathy, even for their own wife and daughter and dog, but you know, more so the kid.
Yeah.
When they're willing to do this because they're like, oh good, I get to keep doing what I'm doing for another year because I passed. And I think it's interesting that early we kind of have hints as to what thematically we're actually up against. And so I feel like that's why when Edward is confronted with the truth and the giving up of alchemy is, and in a weird way, it's like Edward, in a sense, is almost kind of like related to the dwarf in the flask, you know, because the dwarf in the flask is made from a piece of his own father. And then of course, so there's all that interesting aspects to like their connections. But Edward is a direct rejection of what the dwarf in the flask was after. It's like, no, I can give this up because I value the people in my life and I want to do good by others as well. So I'm content. And then doesn't mean that you don't seek out other things or you don't want other things, but he got to live out the life that his father wanted. This is just like the connection that we have with each other. And then the dwarf in the flask, that was never enough. And then look what it cost them. So I do kind of like all those parallels between those various different characters.
Yeah.
I do have a question. By the end, who do you think was a more menacing villain, Bradley or Selim? Pride or Wrath? They're both so. Also, Pride's ending is so weird, where it's just like you're gonna be a new tiny baby because this old woman loved you, and now you get to just be a kid, I guess.
I'm glad that the Führer's wife doesn't have to lose both her son and her husband. That's lovely. At the same time, do I trust that this little kid is going to grow up to be lovely? I don't like the idea at the end because there was the question of, can humans live with homunculi? Like, is this something that we can do? And so it'll be interesting to see that. I don't know if, like, maybe I'm still a little bit confused about it, but like, will Selim grow up as a normal human, or like, will they still have the powers of the of pride and all this and the other? Like, I feel like it's such an interesting way to end that story. But I love that, well, one, pride was defeated in like shame, essentially. Like the fact that that was a thing, but to be reduced to like this fetus thing that was saying, did it say papa or mama or something? I think it might have said papa, or maybe it didn't say either of them. It said something weird. That I'm sure it said mama. Okay, so yeah, because Ed annihilated pride and left as a fetus saying mama. I definitely think by the end, one criticism I will give this show is at the very start of this batch of episodes when they trap Pride with Al. I thought it was so dumb that Al would let this little thing, do the whole Morse code thing with his head for as long as he did. Like, how did nobody realize there would be a pattern to the sound? I know one of them said, oh, you know, Selim is still just a child and he needs to be entertained and blah, blah, blah. But like that is Al's head. And Charlie, after so many hours of like the same kind of sound and that tapping, is a little evil demon. You know, it's like Charlie.
I would just be done with the noise at that point. Yeah, like, stop, please.
Oh, I would be, like, end me. You know, it was such an, like, that was the only thing where I was like, it slipped up for me because I was like, Ali is so much more cleverer than this. You know, like, it's just not really. That's the only thing.
His weakness toward like kids and being nice, and you're just like, Al, come on.
Yeah. I'm glad it happened though, because it did mean that we got Kimberly, and I felt like that was a very interesting progression, and it would have been boring if they had just kept Pride trapped. So I'm glad it happened. I just wish somebody used their noggin just a little bit quicker, you know, just to get to the bottom of that. Yeah, sure. That honestly, that would have driven me wild. But yeah, I feel like as a 4 as well, obviously I definitely prefer Bradley just in all aspects, but Selim just has this very like, not exactly as menacing, but a creepy kind of almost horror movie like being of him. It just terrifying in a totally different way. Because you never think a child or something that takes the form of a child would be able to commit such evil and be the way that they are. So there's just so much, like, so many clashing ideals that come through Selim, and even the voice, it just sounds so innocent and young And I feel with Salim as well, just I'm scared of the little thing, you know, which is why I'm still a little bit scared about the fact that Salim is going to grow up. And I feel like being worried about that bird at the end, I think was just a little bit too on the nose about like how nice and kind he's going to grow up to be. I'm just like, I don't buy it for a minute, you know. Oh, look at this poor birdie.
I do like the idea of I do like that it leaves you off with just kind of like, I don't know, you know, it doesn't really give you a specific answer, but also there is the question of what would Pride have turned out like if it wasn't influenced by Wrath and Father, if it could have just grown up with a normal life. Then so I kind of like that question, because I feel like a lot of the story with some of the older characters and how they look at Ed and Al, there is this like, they're a little naive. They didn't have to live through the war. They didn't have to see the things we saw. And we would like to keep it that way. And thus it results in Ed and Al having this, we don't want anybody to have to die. You know, they have that sort of mindset. And everybody else thinks it's a little foolish, but I appreciate that they view the world in that way, because we've gotten to a point where they can. So if the next step is you have what would have been in the past, this monster, if instead this monster can grow up in a good world, are they going to turn their strengths toward helping even a little bird? You know, it's like kind of that question, or is their evil side going to take over? And I feel like that's a part of the show in its entirety, is kind of wanting to believe that in the best of people, the potential for the best of people, if only their environments were better. Because I think that the whole Ishvalan conflict, it invites you to investigate that through a very practical lens. Like, would we really be that different if we saw that happen? Would we be that different from Scar? I don't think so. You know, like it's not a simple, but if Scar and the Ishvalans were able to have this, and like that's why I really like the fact that Scar didn't die and he gets this rebirth in a sense. And it's kind of like, this will be, what does he say? This will be the third name I have. Call me whatever you want. And I feel like in a way you kind of get Scar and Selim having a similar ending, where you're like, you feel it more for Scar because you've seen the progression of him, but there is this sense of like, we're turning a new leaf and we have this new life possible for us. And I think that's a lot of this story, is when we see there's still a chance. You see it with the Chimera as well. Like, oh, there's still a chance for them to have a good life. So I get it, but at the same time, I'm with you where I'm like, oh, should we have helped? I don't know if maybe we should
keep
take
an eye.
Yeah,
man. We'll keep an eye on him just in case. Yeah, but I like. I do love what you say though, because there is like the sense of rebirth and being able to change. Like if we hadn't have given Scar, for instance, the ability to be able to, in again, like it's so like multifaceted what he's had to go through, and the journey that he's gone on. So it might be a little unfair for me to say like he was the one who needed to change. It wasn't the fact that he needed to change per se, but like so many things needed to change, and the opportunity for things to be made right and for people to grow. So I do like the idea that, yeah, like when they were talking about homunculi and humans living together, that would be a very cool thing to explore, which is why I do love this ending being rather open-ended in a way, because we do also have Ed and Al going off on their adventures and being able to like maybe come back together at some point to share what they've learned. Like there's so much room for more things to happen, and it kind of hurts me a little bit because I don't think there is a direct continuation of this story. So I mean, I've heard there's maybe a movie or something. Like, is there a movie after this? Or
there's some light novels that have, I think, random, almost like side quests. I haven't read them.
Okay, but nothing continues the story past this moment.
I don't think if there is, I don't think it's in a meaningful way necessarily. I will say that I think a lot of the story, as cliche as it sounds, and it kind of ties to the idea of Scar, but also many of these characters, is our ideas of a villain versus a hero are kind of rooted in the time and place. You can take the same character, put them in a different scenario, and they would be somebody's hero. And I appreciate that this show, like you were saying, it's the circumstances surrounding a lot of these characters that are dictating how we view them. And you see that with Edward too, and how he views his own father. Because when you view it through Edward's perspective early on, that is why there's credibility in the feeling of like, what the heck? This guy just left his kids. And then obviously there's a shift in perspective. But then you're like, well, that does change things, you know? So I think that the story does a really good job of making pretty much every character very multifaceted. And I have to say, kind of those like little, even the smallest of characters get some time is when you see that Mustang at the end is kind of like he's being, diligent, and he's studying, and he's like, I have to make things right with the Ishvalans, and if I'm going to be a leader, I got to be a good one. I can't sit and feel sorry for myself. And when there's a chance he's going to get his sight back, he's like, there's someone else I need to talk to first. And you get the phone call with Jean Havoc, and you're like, oh,
he's going to heal him. Oh yeah, like that was so sweet. Yes, Havoc, but also having Ross back as well was like something that I was like, that's something that I tried to predict earlier on as well. I was like, oh, she's going to come back, and it's going to be. She came back in a way I wasn't fully expecting. I thought she would like join the fray and stuff, but she came back in a way that was still very meaningful for her character, and she was still useful and helpful. And so I love the fact that she was able to come back too, and we got to see her, and like so satisfying.
So many characters got to have their time in the spotlight, even if it was just for a moment. And isn't it bizarre how much, because when she's reunited with the other character that had been guarding Ed and Al early on, and he sees her, and he's like, oh, and he's all happy that she's alive. And you're like, yay, he finally knows she's alive. And then you're like, I don't know these two characters. Why do I care so much about them? It's just a gift to make you care so much about so many different characters. You know who's a villain that I'm glad kind of just ate it? Is stupid Kimberly. Kimberly is awful. And I was so happy when it's just like, yeah, time to eat you now. And you're just like, cool. Yeah, I don't care about this guy. I cared more about stupid, what's his name? Gluttony. I felt worse for Gluttony than Kimberly. I was like, Kimberly sucks.
Yeah, with Kimberly as well. Like, because I was a little bit unsure to begin with whether or not like he was like dead, but he did retain a lot of individuality inside Salim, right? Like when we had that moment in episode 61, and that kind of like, that was a really weird thing for me, because I was like, I kind of wanted you to just be gone completely. I didn't really want you to have like this kind of comeback in any sense of the word. Not when we already had so many other characters who I wanted to see resolution by this point, because like episode 61 was only the 3 episodes left. Give the screen time to the people who deserve it. But yeah, Kimberly was someone who I don't think ever really had a meaningful character arc. I don't think really changed too much by the end. Unless
I was okay with the war criminal just having a meaningless existence in the end. You're like, you weren't even worth having something cool happen.
This is true. You know who did deserve to have something happen like that was lovely to them though? Was Greed. Like I got so emotional when Greed was like, I want a chance to have friends like these, and you gave me everything I could ever want, in allowing Ling to like have control again in like his body and stuff. And that was just genuinely so lovely. Like Greed, I mean, I showed the opposite of that really. Like Greed was not, he didn't have that greed. Like he could have easily just continued doing what he was doing, but no, that was again another sacrifice. Like that was so selfless, and probably one of the biggest sacrifices in the show too. And just that also made me a kind of emotional.
I think that Greed is a perfect example of the pieces that Father saw as weaknesses, and we were talking about the balance and everything, whereas we normally see greed as such a terrible thing. But when it's the desire to have the respect and admiration of your peers, when he sees Edward and everybody is like, get him, like everybody's cheering Edward on, and you were reflecting, and Greed is realizing like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to see people stand together. And in a sense, it was like, I wanted to witness the hope of humanity. And I think I wanted to be a part of that. So then when he kind of sacrificed himself, in the end, he kind of got what he wanted to,
Yeah.
He was so greedy, he had to be the hero. He had to insert himself a little bit to be the hero as well.
I love that, because I feel like with all of those like lust, gluttony, everything, I feel like it is okay to indulge. And I feel like that's kind of what this kind of series, it hasn't vilified all of those like facets to humanity. There are some aspects where I feel like it is okay to indulge in that a little bit. And yeah, it's not wrong to kind of want friendship or that feeling of friendship and to have that in abundance. There is definitely levels to it, and obviously the like the father, he definitely had too much, but like I guess it's just like a nice way of having some parts of that that doesn't completely vilify all human needs and desires and wants.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that all of them have a piece of the direct opposite present. So Sloth, it turns out, is actually incredibly fast. I think that's interesting. And I think even what you see with Envy is probably the most obvious. Like they're very envious, but then they run around as if they're the most pompous and capable person, and they fashion themselves in a way that is kind of masculine and feminine at the same time. Like they want to have a little bit of everything, but then in the end they're so pathetic. Like it's just interesting that they have these pieces of the opposite of what you think they're representing within them. I did want to ask you, so the pacing is a journey in and of itself with this story, because within the first chunk of episodes, you think, how are we ever going to have only 64 episodes total? There's so many people, so many characters. There's no way everything is going to wrap up in a satisfying manner. And then you get the next batch of episodes and you're really in the feels with everything with like Winry and Scar, and you're getting all these deeper character moments, and you're still kind of more in the personal side of things. And then you get to the third batch and everything, all of a sudden you're getting characters going off in different directions and everything, you're getting all this lead up. And then suddenly you're realizing, like, how do we only have 16 episodes left? You're kind of, you keep going back and forth between there's no way. And then also, how are we already here and we still have 6? It's a combination of how are there 16 episodes left? It kind of feels like there's one fight remaining. But at the same time, you're like, how are we going to be able to? So you're kind of left unsure. And then these last 16 episodes are truly a race to the finish line. It's all action pretty much. And it never to me overstayed its welcome, even though it kind of sounds like a quarter of the show lasting one, mostly. Obviously you get the last couple episodes, but most of this last quarter is just this one day of fighting. And you would think, like, there's no way that's going to keep my attention. I'm going to get bored. It's just going to be a lot of the same old, same old. And it's not. Like, you're so engrossed in everything that's happening. So I was curious what your feelings were over the course of the entire story, but also just within these 16. Did it really settle in for you? Like, wow, these last episodes are really just this whole last fight.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned maybe in the very first live show or something that I was like, oh, we don't really focus on fighting as much. Like, fighting is present, but it's not really a big focus or anything. Just for us to have in like these 16 episodes, which is great, because I agree, if it had been just like non-stop fights after fights after fights in the early days, I would have been bored, you know, because I'm just like, like there's only so much choreography that you can do. And I don't think I'm that invested just yet in saying like who would win this fight versus whatever. But like to have in these like last 16 episodes, it felt every now and then, I feel like what helped with the pacing was that I wasn't sure which side was winning at any given point. And like it kept flipping back and forth. I feel like maybe I mentioned in the previous live show that it felt like, oh, the good guys are like we have like the upper hand at the minute or whatever. It just kept flipping back and forth. And then when Father consumed God and like that massive thing, you know, when it's like, oh my god, like that's the whole scene with all the hands reaching up and everyone like dying and the whole big massive eye in the sky, like I was like, oh, this is something that's like just too epic and amazing. But yeah, because of the whole flip-flopping between sides, like, oh, by that point I thought, okay, we're screwed. But then, you know, we have the resilience of the main characters.
They had set things in motion.
Yeah, when you learn about all of the things that Hoenheim had done over the years, and like how that's going to help, and also the circle of the eclipse kind of happening is like it's circling itself, and how that's going to help, and greed, you know, being able to bring down the father stuff. There's just so many things at play that, yeah, like you would think with so much happening, so many action sequences happening, that it would be maybe a little bit too much. But no, I feel like because there were different set pieces that really did help. Like we were constantly moving, but it wasn't in a way that with all the fights of it that was stagnated. It felt like every single fight had meaning at this point. It wasn't just a meaningless fight to say who was the bigger fighter or the best fighter between them. It was like actually, as you said, a race to the finish line. Like we need to take down Bradley for good. You know, we need to take down Envy for good and Father for good. So to have that feeling that we are reaching the end point and you could feel it through the tension of the story, like the agency of the characters, and constantly having, you know, like Hawkeye seemed like she was going to die at one point. Al, when you saw his armor was pretty much mostly, you know, gone. That was like, you know, there's just there was too much emotion and too much of my own like desires for what I wanted out of the show, like at play, that it never felt like it was weirdly paced or anything. It was brilliantly paced, in my opinion. It was like probably like one of the best finales, because I wanted something epic to happen. I wanted something big to happen because this is all led up to this. So yeah, it just I thought the pacing was absolutely brilliant, and every how you described the first like 3/4 of the show was like genuinely perfect. Like sometimes I thought it would be episodic to begin with, but actually it wouldn't. Like those episodes did contribute to the overall arching themes, but there was just like so many things that by this point all made sense and all had relevance. Like none of it, I don't think a single episode was wasted. You could have a show with over 1,000 episodes, but this one I don't think wasted a single episode. In 64 episodes, like yeah, I guess that is enough time to tell a complete story, because it did tell pretty much a complete story, but at the same time it leaves you wanting more but also feeling satisfied with what you've got.
Yeah.
I don't want to be like Father. I don't want to demand more. I don't want to overconsume and demand more all like constantly and never feel satisfied. It was satisfying. It was very, very satisfying. What a beautiful ending. Tragic at times, but just quite poignant, and it gave me everything I kind of wanted by the end.
And I think what's great too, what you were describing about how initially you're like, there's not as much fighting as I thought, and then it's like, just wait and see, you know. But it gave you time to care about these characters so that when they're in fights and when they're in danger, especially because we take out Hughes and Nina so early, we're like, oh, they can die. She's not willing to hold back with some of these. So you always felt, you were pretty sure Ed and Al were going to at least make it to the end, but you also weren't sure if she was going to give you that happily ever after for the two of them. But you know they can actually be killed in this story, or at the very least, even if they don't die, you know that bad things can happen as a result of their injuries. So you've been shown that, so it makes you care when they are in danger. You also want them to succeed. You see time and time again that you're like, oh, they're so close. I want them to get this, but also I guess there's this other really big threat, whatever's going on over here. And then additionally, for the more kind of fun side of things, you do start to think to yourself, I kind of want to see those two characters fight. And then when you're getting more reasons for example, you find out what Envy did and his role in the Ishvalan War. So then you're like, I kind of want to see him and Scar face off, or I need Scar to face off against Kimberly because Kimberly did terrible things during the war. And you start to develop in your mind these, I hope this fight happens scenarios. So then that whole last chunk is just a feast because you're worried for everybody. You care about everybody. The fights actually matter. They fight for the characters individually. They matter for all of mankind. And also there's some cool, like, oh, I can't wait to see. Because I know for myself, I'm like, I'm waiting for Mustang and Wrath to somehow face off. They have to, right? Because like he's been keeping Hawkeye away from him. And what's it look like when you have these two powerhouses go face to face? And anyway, I just feel like that makes it that much cooler at the same time. I mean, I know we've been talking about how meaningful a lot of the themes are. There's a pretty fun, cool factor, plus the humor in this story as well.
Yes. No, I agree.
When you first started this, you told me that you were a little nervous because on one hand, you're nice. And I think you were like, if I hate it, I don't want to hurt your feelings. But also, I think you were kind of like, I've heard, you know, some things, but I don't know that much about Full Metal. How would you say it met your expectations or defied your expectations, good or bad? Was it better than you were expecting? Was it like, oh, now I understand where people are coming from? What would you say your overall takeaway was versus where you started?
I can definitely understand why people would say this is like the greatest anime of all time, because I've definitely heard that in the past. Like this is a lot of people's favorite, and I can definitely see why. Because I feel like one thing that surprised me the most was just how impactful nearly every single character is, in how different of an opinion you would have on pretty much every single character by the end of it, and to have so much at play. Whereas when you first start the series, and I think it's just about two brothers wanting to get, like their bodies back, essentially. That's just all I thought would happen. We would have the episodic format. We would have them go on little adventures and come across new people every episode or whatever. But to have it be so much more about the politics of this landscape that bleeds into our own world is something that I didn't expect. I definitely expected way more fights to begin with than we did end up having. Yeah, like it definitely, I can't even think of what my expectations could have been, because I came in with such a blank slate that at this point, yeah, like I would definitely say this is one of my favorite animes. I mean, I know I can't like say too much because I haven't seen that many per se exactly, but I've read quite a few manga stories at this point where I could say have been like the same length as the length of Full Metal Alchemist, and yeah, it would definitely be one of my favorites now. And I know I was definitely worried that I wouldn't enjoy it or like even have the nicest of things to say about it. But what I've loved about the story is that there has been so much to say about it. There's always something to say, I think, about every single episode. We could have talked about every single episode one by one if we wanted to. I mean, I would have loved to have had the time for that 100%. Because like, can you imagine like some kind of podcast like doing like every single episode, just like dissecting and going through the themes
Okay,
and stuff?
don't give me ideas. Don't give me ideas. I would do it. I love the story so much. Don't.
Well, look, I bought the Blu-ray. Like that's how much I enjoyed it. I bought the Blu-ray of the entire series, and that means that I can keep it forever and ever. So streaming can never take it away from me. And
Me too.
it's
I also have the Blu-ray.
we have got to. You've got to. It looks so
Just in
cool.
case.
Just in case. And it is something that I definitely think I would rewatch in the future. And I feel like it'll probably even be better upon a rewatch and being able to like see all of those things develop, and oh, that's the foreshadowing for that. And now I've got like this different opinion on this character to begin with because I know how they end up. Like nothing beats a first time watch sometimes for the surprises and the amount of care that you end up feeling. There's something about first time watches that could never be replicated, but I feel like now I just want to appreciate the story for what it is. And
it's such a whirlwind the first time, and then the second time you're like, what the heck? She was doing this from the beginning. You know, the whole idea of Maze Hughes seeing what they were planning, and you're like, that's why they took him out. You know, like I know,
it's
yeah,
so
that early, yeah. So the pacing is the way that the first time around you're just in it, and you're kind of in for every twist and turn. And it's the phrase like the forest for the trees. You know, you don't really see the big picture until after the fact. And then you're right. The first time is just like the explosive experience. But then after, it's more of like an appreciation for everything that was laid out along the way.
I didn't think I would like Ed as much as I ended up liking him. I feel like he could have become very annoying. But fortunately... He's endearing. Oh my gosh, like there's so many things I love about him. He's definitely one of my favorite like protagonists, and him and Al, you know, like
you just got to go back and watch it with the sub.
Oh yes, well,
and then you got to read the manga, you know. So
which I do have nearly all of the volumes, so it's definitely going to happen. Like I cannot wait. Like it's just such a rich story. I love it when a story is told from beginning to end. I love that so much. There's so much satisfaction with that. And to have a story like this, it makes me want to watch the 2003 anime. It makes me want to watch
the opposite of me. I'm like, I don't want to be anywhere near it.
I want to consume like all the stories. Like now I can watch like video essays on it. I can watch all the spoiler stuff on it because I've seen it, so I won't get spoiled. You know, there's like so many things that I can do now. Like the world is my oyster, and yeah, it just I never would have expected it to turn out the way it did, genuinely. And definitely the biggest surprise is how much I would love so many of the characters. I will never forget Hawkeye and Mustang. I'll never forget Olivier and Armstrong, Ed and Al, Winry. There's so many people that I kind of will just remember forever now and just want to constantly, you know, like go back to and catch up with. You know, there's just what a beautiful cast of characters.
And I think something too with this story that sort of every time I reread or rewatch something that I've loved, there is that fear of like, is this going to be as good as I remember? And for
Mm,
me, part of what makes Full Metal almost timeless, you could say, is there are so many themes that, depending on the time that you're watching it, it can be extrapolated and applied regardless, because sadly the world doesn't progress at the fastest of paces, and then we do regress and then we have to progress again. And so I feel like if you watched this when it first came out, there are things that are happening in the story that you're like, oh, that's like this, whatever thing that may be. And then watching it today, some of the moments, I feel like everything with the Ishvalan conflict especially, and watching that unfold, and kind of, you almost, I mean, you want so badly to root for Roy Mustang and you want to root for Armstrong and Hawkeye, and then you see that war and you're like, oh, you kind of are like, they were the villains, you know. And I feel like when you understand the world a little bit more, you understand characters like Scar more, and you can apply that. I'm sure, sadly, in 10 years, there will be something else that you're like, that's like this. And you can easily see how it relates to things going on in your own world. And I feel like really brilliant stories are the ones that you can point to and be like, wow, this really held up a unfortunate mirror to how we are as a society, but also what we could be. And I think that's why, because I do like bleakness sometimes. Sometimes you just need to be like, wow, humanity sucks. You know, like you sometimes just need to be confronted with that. And Full Metal does it, but it gives you that glimmer of hope at the same time, which is why I like the ending, because I think some people feel like the ending's a little too happy. But because like hope and humanity is such a central part of it, that I feel like that ending is fitting. And it doesn't mean there wasn't sacrifice, and it doesn't mean that there wasn't loss. But look what we could have if we actually come together and unite. And
yeah.
I feel like the story, it doesn't pull back, it doesn't hold back, but it shows you what we could be. And I will always be grateful for this story for that. I love it so much.
I feel like the beating heart of this story is always the potential of doing right and having the potential to do right. That's always been there from the very beginning. Ed and Al wanting to make right what they did with the transmutation and stuff. Like there's always things that characters want to do right. And I feel like having an ending like that where we have Mustang, Hawkeye, wanting to I think I've got it written down about Hawkeye says it won't erase our sins, but it's not too late to fix things. I feel like that's something that has always been prevalent in the story. So to end that way, it makes sense. You know, it feels right to have that kind of direction at the end, because you can adopt that philosophy into our real life. Like there's still so much that humanity has done, or certain governments have done, and countries have done, that is just so awful. And it's never too late to make things right. It's never too late to fix things. And yeah, I feel like the ending was perfect for me. It was genuinely something that provided that hope in a direction to move forward. Because yeah, it would have been, again, I also like bleak things every now and then too. But if we had have ended on such a bleak note, like, no, we can't change anything, this is the way it is, then
the thing swallows God and then it ends.
Yeah,
that was it. Could you imagine?
Yeah. We are gone. I was honestly, by that point, I was like, there is no way that we could come back from this, because that is so much power. But yeah, what a way that would have ended, definitely.
So you said before you feel like you really like it, but you feel like you can't say it's one of your favorites because you haven't watched that much anime. Let me tell you, it's gonna ruin you now for most of like, because I have my friend and I both had this feeling of like, well, this is one of our favorites, and surely once we're a little more, I shouldn't say that with certainty, because you know, maybe you'll find something and you're like, this is way better, and maybe you'll find lots of things that you feel that for. But I feel like Full Metal is a little bit of a curse. It's a blessing and a curse because it's so good, but then at the same time, like a lot of stuff is good, but it's, you know, it's not this good. So it's when you find something so good that forever and always you're just kind of not comparing, not that every, you know, comparing is the thief of joy sort of situation, but it's hard to find, I think, something that matches this as strongly, which is why we just got to read the new series, you know.
Yeah, so you decided to curse me by making me watch
Sorry.
Full Metal, and you're like, "Yep, well, that's it for you now, Gav." No, I do think I agree. Like comparing things can be the thief of joy. Absolutely, I love the possibilities of discovering so much more series after this, and I need to learn more about this other series that the author
Yeah.
is writing. I need to start
You
reading that.
know, she has a series about an agriculture school, right?
No,
I've
I
only
had
read a
no idea.
couple I only read a couple volumes. I would give it another go, but it's just like very slice of life, these kids at an agriculture school learning about like farming and stuff. That's because I think
Very
that's
different.
somewhat related to her own experiences.
Okay.
There's a part where there's like a horse racing thing, and I use air quotes because it's not your typical horse racing. But yeah, it's I tried a little bit of it and I was like, yeah, I mean, I might come back to this, but I don't know if this is what I'm looking for right now. And I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
I just it's very different. But anyway, the new one
Yeah.
I think is kind of like a return to what a lot of us came to love about
Mm.
what she does. So, by the way, I was going
Mm.
to show you. You remember how you sent me the like Mustang with his hand cauterizing the wound and you're like, I need you to draw
Mm.
this, you know? Okay, well, the Beyond the Inferno scene, I was like, that scene where he just looks so sad at what he's done. I had to draw it for you. Okay. So
Oh
I
my
went ahead and
gosh.
did Mustang for that too.
Are you sure you didn't just print that like it was an
I
actual
did
screen
not
grab?
just print it. I can show you all
Oh,
the pictures I took along the way. I was so scared to try the background because I hadn't been doing backgrounds yet. And I was like, I gotta
oh,
try. Because that scene where
that,
it's like the fire glowing in the background, I feel like it's really
uh-huh.
symbolic and stuff. I was like, I gotta try to capture it.
Oh my
So
God, that is amazing. You need to post that everywhere. Like stat. Post it
no, it
everywhere.
was for you as a
Oh,
thank
and I
you
love it.
for. Oh well,
And I
that
love it.
sounds conceited. Like I did this for you. Be grateful. That's not what I mean.
No, I
Because you
honestly,
asked me
it's
to
the
draw
best.
Armstrong, and then also that scene of him, and then so for this one, I was
Oh,
like, this is like the best scene. I wanted to send it to you earlier, but I was like, I can't ruin that scene. I can't even
mm,
talk about it with him yet. We got to wait until
mm.
our
Oh,
discussion. So
it's done. I'm such a demanding diva, but you know, if you want me to come to these things, you got to give me something in return. Equal.
okay,
You
wait.
know,
Because you said that, who do you feel like of all the Full Metal characters you're the most like? Not the one that
oh,
you aspire to be like, not the one that you
mm.
thirst after the most. Which one do you feel like best? You're like, oh, that's me.
Oh, what a good question. I would say Salim. No, I'm kidding. I could you imagine? I would probably say Ross, and I would
Okay.
say only Ross because I feel like I'm somebody who I would want to be main character. I wouldn't want that
Okay.
much attention on me, but I would want to be helpful. I would want to be useful, and I would like when I have my friends, I'd be loyal to a T. And Ross is probably like such a curveball in a way, but I don't think I'm as well. I do think Ross is brave, but I'm definitely not as brave as like say Hawkeye or anything like that. I do
Hawkeye's
think
got like
Ross
a
is.
stoicism that's
Hmm.
hard to match. Yeah.
Hmm. No, but
I think that's a really good one. I'll tell you,
okay,
I
good.
also think, even though you said you don't want to be main character, you've got some Alphonse in you for sure. You know, just a
Yeah,
cynical, you just said you're loyal to
I.
your friends.
Hmm. And emotionally, I do get very emotional. And I feel like with Al, his emotion was such a driving force for his character and for Ed as well. Like he rubbed off on Ed so many times and he needed to. And I love the size of that water flask like, so much. It's massive. It's so big. I love it. But my little dinky one is just I feel like you're Al and I'm Ed with our little water
With
flask
our
just
water
there.
bottles.
Yeah, but no, part of me did want to see Al, but I was like, I'm not main character energy, but I do, I would say the emotions, like I feel so much, and I think I would be like Al on an emotional level, 100%, 100%.
And then who turned out by the end to be your the one that you do thirst after the most? I have to know. Since
Say as
you
much,
you brought thinking
yeah.
bad of Bradley, so
Yeah, well, I feel like we started off with Armstrong. I think Armstrong was the one I thirsted after the most first, then Mustang, and I guess now, yeah, pretty much King Bradley. Uh, You know, I think it might have to go to Armstrong. As much as I love
Still goes
Mustang,
to Armstrong.
yeah, there's kind of a part of me that I feel bad because Mustang and Hawkeye deserve each other. Like they belong to each other
You
in a
don't
way.
want to get in the way.
I don't want to get on Hawkeye's bad side, you know, definitely not. But I feel like with Armstrong, there's just I find him so endearing, and I love his heart so much in the way that he's so easy to cry, like easy to make cry. Even you'll always find him crying at something emotional, like in the background, and that's the kind of man for me. A man who is in touch with his most sensitive side is definitely the man for me. So I do think at the end of the day, it has to be Armstrong. And I don't know if that would be the same for you or not, or if Mustang but it's Armstrong all the way for me now.
I will say I have I think a soft spot for the well done, I'm willing to do whatever to be a good leader characters, because I mean I loved Erwin in Attack on Titan, and I love Mustang in Full Metal, and I love Clive from Final Fantasy 16, as you know, even though you've never played the game, you know that about me. So any of those like very I'm willing to sacrifice for like the greater good characters, I'm always like, you're just better than everybody else and you're cool. It's hard to not be drawn to that, you know.
Well,
I'm not cool enough to be Hawkeye though.
Oh, you all. You so all. You because I was actually about to ask you who would be your girl crush.
My girl crush in this story. I mean, there's so many cool ones. Like Azumi's really cool, and Olivier's really cool, and obviously Hawkeye is awesome. And then I'm trying to think of there's I don't know. I mean, they're also good. That's Lawn Fawn is so cool. But also I'm like, isn't she like a teenager? So I don't know if I can say I have a girl crush on her, but they're all awesome. I mean, the ladies in this, all the characters in this. Oh, I forgot to mention that like Miles and Scar getting to join together to like help. Yeah, I really liked that little in the photos. I really liked that. We kind of joked about it in a previous discussion, but I mean, if I'm being honest, I think I am a lot like Al. Or excuse me, Ed. I'm a lot like Ed in that I'm just like, I have too many feelings, and then I am like, don't feel these ones, but you can feel angry, so cover it up with like being loud, or just wanting to avoid the topic, or just being a bundle of rage or whatever. So I think I'm the most like Ed, even though Al is such a sweetheart, and I want to be like Al. Owl. I want to be like Owl. I want to be like Al. I think the most, but I think I am actually more like Edward. And then it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's so much about Edward I would love to be like. There's so much, so many qualities that I would love to be like Ed, like 100%. Like I love the fact that he has so much fire and is able to just like without questions stand up against people and not have the fear of that. Sometimes he did need to be reined back in, which is why I needed Al. But I love his like way that he would just stand up, and that's something that I definitely sorely lack. So there's qualities about you, Elle, as well that I would love to have myself. So yeah.
See, but we balance each other out, which is like the whole theme of the show and stuff. You know, we need each other.
Exactly.
Sean definitely has a soft spot for Hawkeye. And I'm like, I wish I was Mustang then, you know? I wish I was Mustang because Hawkeye is like stoic. She loves her dog. And I'm like, that's kind of like Sean, you know, like quiet, stoic, but actually really sweet deep down and nice to other people. And but like has your back, you know. And I'm like, but I'm not cool enough to be Mustang.
No, you keep saying that, but I think you are. I think you are. Like, nice. Why wouldn't you be cool enough to be Mustang? Is the thing like what makes him not cool?
Him? Did you not watch the show?
but have you seen you? That's another thing.
I'm derpy.
That's cool to me. That is so cool.
Well, that's very nice. That's very nice. Anyway, this was great. Did you have any final things that you wanted to mention?
I mean, there was another. Did I mention this that when after Hoenheim said he would sacrifice himself, having Ed cry after that. Did I mention that? Because like that also
We
got me
talked about
cold.
Ed calling him dad, but him
Yeah.
crying at that moment.
Yeah, he was like actually crying. That pretty much nearly got me as well. Like I know I said there was two moments that got me really emotional, but if there was an honorary third moment, it would be his like Ed's reaction to his dad being like, "This is what I would do for you." You always said. I also love it at the very start of the Bachelor episode we watched when Hohenheim is talking to Pride and Hohenheim says the hero always waits the last possible second before making his move. Don't ever mock my son. And I was like, oh, that again. Like I feel like
And
Hohenheim is just like the best now. He's the best.
and Hohenheim having the sneaky, like, actually, I made the circle and you just didn't even know. He really did. I mean, that quote's good because it kind of it shows that he had something up his sleeve the whole time as well.
Yep. Oh, there was also a character called Rebecca in episode 50, who I believe we have met before, but like this was when I was really paying attention.
Friends.
Yes, yes. I loved it when she brought more weapons and she said you're not allowed to flirt with me unless you've got money. And I was like, that's me. That is me.
You want to be like Al, but you're actually like her.
Yeah, I would probably say so. Like, I don't think Rebecca got enough screen time for me to be Rebecca exactly, but and I love Armstrong saying to Olivier, "I'm glad to see you're okay." I love that so much. Gosh, that's just. Oh yeah, I loved it when they were like they were broadcasting to the citizens in episode 53 about all of that stuff because they were allowing them to actually form their own opinions, and the Ishvalans were also getting in on like supporting them and spreading the good word as well, and opening their eyes to the military and what's like been happening. Like I just love the sharing of knowledge. That was the right kind of knowledge to pursue, which obviously Father was not pursuing that. They were pursuing power more than anything else in a way. So yeah. Oh, and the last thing was when Mustang is beating Envy's butt and Envy transforms into Mustang and Mustang doesn't have that. Hang on, wait, let me go. Envy,
I know what you're talking about because
Envy
Mustangs...
transforms into Hughes. Yeah, Envy transforms into Hughes and like he's like Hughes. No, Mustang doesn't have that much of a reaction of Envy transforming into Hughes. And the thing that Mustang says to Envy is, to invoke his image, you must be a glutton for punishment. And that I thought was such a fantastic line. And how Hawkeye wasn't even fooled by Envy as well, transforming into Mustang. Like, didn't even. I just again love how Hawkeye just saw right through it and was like, you're not Mustang. I love it. I love it.
All those little moments.
All those little moments build up to things. Big,
intense action.
Yeah. Oh, there's just so many, honestly.
Well, so our journey come to an end.
You know, is this what dying is like?
We're like Hohenheim, where we're like, well, I'm at peace right now, but I could watch more anime.
Yes. Does that mean we're gonna go gray now? We're gonna go gray and like,
maybe.
I hope not. Oh maybe. No, I'm already
now we just got to figure out our next one that we watch and discuss. What's it gonna be? We don't have to decide right this second.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, wait, is there a countdown? Like, we're not allowed to stop this until we decide something. Yeah, honestly, I would love to do this. I would love to do this again. Sorry, I just bashed my desk. I would love to do this again because just having a format of being able to talk through these kinds of mediums of entertainment like anime, manga, having something like that does like make me feel so happy to be able to discuss and dissect. So I'm always up for
we
more
of this. We just got to get you addicted to Apothecary Diaries so that you can come join us in that area.
I was eyeing up that Blu-ray. I was eyeing up the Blu-ray of season 1, and I do have the first 4 volumes of the manga as well. But you're doing the light novel, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm reading the light novels because that's what the manga is based off. But I'm pretty sure 2 different manga series. So I don't know which one you have, but I think one of them is heavier. It's still the same story, but I think it's like heavier on the romance parts. The other one's heavier on the political intrigue mysteries components or something is what I've heard.
I have no idea.
And
No idea
then
what's
there's
wrong
the
with
anime, and the anime is like directly, it's so closely related to what you get in the light novels. It's such a true adaptation that it almost feels like the light novels came after, because they're that close.
Wow.
And they're really funny. I'm going to send you a montage of Mau Mau noises to try to convince you to watch. And you'll.
Sure.
Yeah, Mau Mau is the main character, and she's normally very like, she doesn't really have a lot of emotions unless she's like irritated, or if she sees poison or herbs that can lead to medicines, then she gets all excited. And the voice actor for Mau Mau makes the absolute best weird noises. And her little chibi form, because Mau Mau is basically meaning cat. So they like make her, they give her like little cat ears, or sometimes like a random tail will show up. Luna's heard the word cat, I guess. And then
Oh
didn't
no.
like
No, I agree. I hear the word cat, I bark too.
no, you have cute ones there.
Yeah, and they drive me up the wall, so every now and then I bark.
I have to send you. So the other day when I was trying to work, Luna came over and was like licking my leg, and she was just out of frame. So it's like, do I keep going and pretend this isn't happening, or? And then she like went almost like under the desk, and then was just, I could just see her face staring at me, and I'm just like, I can't focus like this. And her new thing that she does is she waits and she'll drink her entire bowl of water all at once. And I can just hear her. She drinks it so loud, like really loud. And it's just for so long. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, please drink your water like a normal dog. Why are you drinking it all at once? I give it you plenty.
Sitcom. That is a sitcom dog right there. She knows how to make you laugh. Yeah. I love that.
Well, this has been very fun. We're devolving into chaos when I start talking about my dog. So we'll wrap things up. This was so fun. I can't thank you enough. It was great. We just need the Witch Hat anime to come out so that we can indulge in that together.
Well, I can't thank you enough for opening my eyes to FULLMETAL Alchemist and making me see Hoenheim, because I still think it would have taken me a long time to get to the manga. So better late than never, I say. But definitely something I needed in my life right now. And it was beautiful and amazing and so much goodness. And these chats were just so fun. So thank you for having me. And I can't wait for the next ones. Can't wait.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I think we'll be doing more like Full Metal discussions every now and then, right? Like,
I mean, I am definitely open to it. I don't want to impose on your busy schedule, but I'm always down. So
always
get Sean in here. We can argue about which characters are the best.
Yes, love it. Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. And for anybody that has been joining, thank you for joining us with these discussions. It's been great. Thanks, Gavin. And we'll see you all later. Bye. Bye.